Welcome to the District of Tofino regular council meeting for the 15th of March. I will call the meeting to order at 10 a.m. and ask first for a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Councillor McMaster, seconded by Councillor Blanchette. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. And the minutes from the regular council meeting held February 23rd. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Our first order of business today is some business that arose from past minutes to do with the Tofino to Locate Higher Learning Initiative letter of intent, and the recommendation that was to come forward to council on March 15th for this meeting regarding the review of the resolution that we made some time ago on the Tofino to Locate Higher Learning Initiative. We initially put forward we approved a letter of intent and a $15,000 allocation towards the initiative. The agreement with the CBT was not completed, and then the CBT has since struck an education committee which is just getting underway to continue the next phase of the higher learning project, the regional higher learning project. So my recommendation to council is that at this time we simply rescind the resolution to 5414, and the money would then go back into the reserve to still be used for education purposes, but we'll wait for the committee to get underway and then come to us with a recommendation on how Tofino could be involved.
I'll move that recommendation.
Okay, is there a seconder? So that would be moved and seconded that council rescind resolution 25414. Can it be as simple as that? Yes. Okay. All right. Any discussion on this? Questions? Everyone's okay with that? Good. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Great. Announcements from the mayor. The only thing I wanted to let you know is that on March 3rd, Bob and I attended a meeting of all of the elected leaders of the 8 communities in the region, with the exception of Heshquit, which had its inaugural council meeting for the new term on that same day. So the balance of the 7 communities, the elected leaders and their chief administrative officers or chief head staff met, and we had about a 4-hour meeting. It was very positive, and we discussed a number of topics, and what emerged from the meeting was a desire to continue to meet on a regular basis, and there were 5 issues that kind of rose to the top as being those that are of most importance to all of the communities and something we could work on regionally. So those 5 issues are emergency preparedness, transportation, health, water and sewer infrastructure, and education. The next meeting will be May or June, and we're going to focus on emergency preparedness as a possible shared service for all of the communities on the West Coast instead of us all independently undertaking it. I will send you the notes from the meeting. There's some detailed notes, and then you can have a good read for yourself. And so then we'll go to delegation. And our first is Bill Dawson from BC Assessment Authority. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. And, you know, I do lots of presentations to councils and regional districts, and this is the first where the councilmen were talking about beer beforehand. So I'm going to like this place. My favorite is IPA, of course, and that Tofino IPA, the Cretin, is fantastic. Yeah, Hop and Cretin. That's awesome stuff.
Please come back to Tofino as many times as you enjoy our libation.
Well, I don't have to. It's like right in my liquor store in the Nanaimo. And you were talking about my favorite sport, rugby, as well. So, right on. How do I get this? How do I get my presentation up? No problem. So as I said, I do lots of presentations at the beginning of every year when the assessment roll comes out. Usually what I do is I go straight to the regional districts because you can knock off a lot of mayors and councilmen all at once giving a presentation when you do a regional district. So I've done Cowichan Valley Regional District, Nanaimo Regional District, Comox Valley Regional District, Alberni-Clayoquot, Strathcona and Powell River. Practically everyone accepted my invitation except Mount Waddington. So don't tell them because that's a long ways away. But I would go anyway. So thank you for having me here today. I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm sorry, can you all see me? I'm going to talk about BC assessments a bit, and then I'm going to go over the 2016 assessment roll highlights. And since I did a presentation to Hewlett yesterday and Tofino today, I've kind of lumped it all up into one presentation. So you're going to get statistics for both communities, which I hope are going to give you a little bit of good benchmarks to compare to one another. So about BC Assessment. I've been working for BC Assessment for, I'm just coming up to my 25th year now. And I started in 1991 in the Victoria office, where I did the Souk area for a couple of years, and then I did appraisals and assessments in the downtown core of Victoria. The CEO at the time said to Bill, in order to succeed in this company, you've got to move north. So I moved to Nanaimo. Over the 49th parallel, he actually said, well, we were kind of thinking of Dawson Creek, but so far so good. The move to Nanaimo has been good for me and my family. History of BC Assessment: we were established in 1974 under the Assessment Act. It was an all-party committee that created BC Assessment. Apparently, back then in 1974, the assessment process was a bit chaotic. The assessments were done by your local municipalities. And local municipalities used assessments as a leverage for taxes along with their mill rate. And there was a lot of inconsistencies in how it was done. Properties across streets from one another, where you would have Victoria and Saanich, would be assessed at different levels of the market. So they decided, let's create a uniform Crown corporation to do this job. We're one of the biggest assessment organizations in North America. We do all of the province. In Alberta, for instance, there's an assessment department in the city of Calgary and in the city of Edmonton, and then the rural area is done by the province itself. We're one of the oldest Crown corporations, which is kind of neat to think about. At 40 years, back in 2014, we're doing well. The average life of a Crown corporation apparently in BC is about 30 years. So we've surpassed and hopefully hanging in there. Corporate structure: we have 6 geographic regions with 15 field offices across the province, 1 head office in Victoria in the Uptown Shopping Center development. We have about 648 employees. 345 of them are professional appraisers. Our vision: we're trusted to value BC. The mission: to create uniform assessments which are relied upon to build sustainable communities in the province. And then there's the values, the ABCs of BC Assessment: accountability, balance, coaching, continuous improvement, and customer satisfaction. Our service commitment to the province is open and transparent, fair and accurate, timely and accessible, knowledgeable and respectful, and innovative and collaborative. Innovative and collaborative is a really important one. As I said, we have about 650 employees, and that's pretty well the number of employees we've had for the past 15 years. And in that time frame, the number of parcels have grown dramatically throughout the province. I think in a 4-year period, we added the equivalent of the cities of Burnaby, Maple Ridge, and Richmond with the same people. And we've done that by being innovative and collaborative. Collaborative, getting our information from other sources, being innovative by leveraging technology so that we can do things more efficiently and less costly. Fair and accurate is another really important one. How we try to be fair and accurate is the assessments are built on inventory. And the success of an assessment organization is whether or not people believe that they're being treated equitably. Has anyone been to the eValue BC online internet? Great. What'd you think of it? Great. What that does is it allows a property owner to take a look at the inventory that we have on the property, their property. It allows the property owner to compare their assessment to all the others in their neighborhoods. It allows the property owner to take a look at all the sales that were the basis of that assessment. So hopefully that property owner, after going to eValue BC, is feeling that their assessment is correct, their assessment is equitable, and their assessment is accurate. I remember back in probably 1996, for the first time ever, the Oak Bay assessment roll was published in the Oak Bay Star. And we were really worried. What are people going to think when they can look up their assessment in the newspaper? They're going to be mad. They're going to be They're going to be knocking the doors down. We were surprised. People were really interested. And they started walking around the neighborhood in their tweed coats and tweed jackets, guessing properties assessments with the newspaper underneath their collar and their umbrella in their other hand. Moving on. Our product is the assessment roll. It's an annual list of all the property values in the province. What's on the assessment roll is the ownership, value, classification, and exemptions that are applied to each property. But there's a whole bunch of data in the background that builds those values, which you have access to if you're the property owner. Or if you're making an appeal, you can ask for the data from other properties so you can create proper benchmarks. It's about 2 million properties with a total of about $1.2 trillion on the roll last year. And it provided last year about $6.8 billion in property taxes for the services of municipalities and schools to operate throughout the province. My wife, I have to focus on this a lot. What I do is meaningful. My wife is a nurse practitioner. She saves lives. We talk more about her work around the dinner table than mine. Our commitment to BC is our customers, and our customers fall into three groups: property owners, residential or non-residential, local governments like Tofino and Ukilit, First Nations, and the provincial government. Local governments have been consistent throughout the years. First Nations is a real growth industry for the assessment world. First Nations throughout the province can be self-taxing in a number of different ways. The most common is through independent taxation through the Indian Act, or the Fiscal and Statistical Management Act, where First Nations say any occupiers that are on our lands become accessible and taxable to the First Nation. And their lands are defined as the lands that are their reserves. But over the last 15 years, there's been a number of First Nations who have signed treaties with the federal and provincial government, the Niska Nation being the first, followed by Tawasin, followed by the 5 Malnuth Nations on the west coast, followed by, this year, Siaman and the Yale bands. And they become accessible just like any other British Columbian with the use of the Assessment Act. And in 13 years after signing that treaty, the actual band members or the First Nation members themselves become taxable and lose their taxation exemptions through the Indian Act. This is just happening up in Niska this year. So it's a real growth industry of them coming to BC Assessment as a customer or as a client, and then when they become a treaty First Nation, being assessed just like any other person in the province. Key dates. Each year, the assessment roll is based on valuation date of July 1st. Our property appraisers take all the sales that have occurred in the second and third quarter of each year, if there's a lot of sales, and they imagine that as representing the July 1st valuation date. October 31st is the physical and condition date. What you have on your property as of October 31st is what the assessor assesses. If you have a 50% complete house on October 31st, that's what you'll get assessed for on the upcoming roll. Land titles, November 30th. Whatever's registered in the LTO on that date is what we assess. The number of properties that exist and who owns those properties. Exemptions are applicable by December 31st. The assessment notices go out January 2nd. You have the month of January to ask inquiries of the assessor. You can go to the Property Assessment Review Panel, which is just coming to an end right now. On today, it's the last day of Park. And if you'd like to go to the second level of appeal, you have to have your appeal into the Property Assessment Appeal Board by April 30th. How do we value properties differently? The vast majority of properties, whether they are residential, commercial, industrial, accommodation, are all based on market value as of July 1st. There are some properties, a very small percentage, that are legislated. Values that are, the provincial government says, use these, assessor, because these are really confusing to determine the market value for. Those would be long, skinny things like railways, utility lines, pulp mills, large sawmills of a certain capacity. all get that legislated rate. Wind farms way up north, they all get a legislated rate because they don't usually sell. And when they do sell, they're sold on issues based on the cost of water, the cost of labor, the cost of pulp, that really are different from land and buildings from what the assessor is supposed to assess. 9 classifications of property. The most common throughout the province, of course, is the residential classification and the business and other classification. We put the properties based on their use into those 9 different classes. It's up to the municipality then to assign the mill rates to put on all of those classes, which form the property taxes. It's a 2-step process. The assessor comes up with the assessment, the municipalities come up with the mill rate, there's your tax dollars. Exemptions fall into 2 types: statutory exemptions and permissive exemptions. Statutory exemptions are pretty easy. It says in legislation that be exempt. This building as a municipal hall is exempt because there's a section in the community charter that says property owned by a municipality is exempt, statutorily. Schools are exempt. Cemeteries are exempt. Hospitals are exempt based on the Health Authority Act. There's a litany of legislation that says, assessor, know these and put these properties exempt on the roll. Permissive exemptions are a lot more fun. Permissive exemptions to the Community Charter, Section 224, says municipality, you have the ability to exempt properties if you so decide. It has to be a certain type of property. The mayor's brother's house can't be exempted, because that doesn't fall into one of those samples. But it's up to the municipality to determine the permissive exemption bylaw that has to be in the assessor's hands as of October 31st. And make sure that happens, because we've had a few municipalities who've missed that date, and there's nothing we can do about that. That's all I had about BC assessment as a corporation. I'll go into the highlights of the roll right now. Tofino and Ucluelet, the 2016 roll comparison. Tofino has a total net taxable value of $748 million in all those 9 classes. Ucluelet, about 55% of that, 402,000. 402 million, sorry. A lot bigger than that. 78% of the total roll in Tofino is in residential. 80% in Ucluelet. Very similar statistics. 21% of the roll is in commercial in Tofino. 19% in Ucluelet. Very similar statistics in both of those categories. The number of single-family dwellings under 2 acres, residential. 375 in Tofino, 402. That is an improved house that is on a property less than 2 acres in size. Very similar numbers. What's really different, though, is the number of vacant parcels. Ucluelet has 94 houses or lots that you can build on that are not built on. Ucluelet has 312. And that's an enormous. What we do is we compare ratios, improved to vacant. Tofino has a ratio of about 4 to 1. Ucluelet's like 1.28 to 1. And this can have a huge effect on value. Remember your economics class? Demand and supply curves. If you've got a going supply of a property and it doesn't get absorbed quickly, that has an enormous effect on value of properties. Because that purchaser doesn't have to buy your lot. He can go to the other 311 and buy those lots. And probably one of those 311 properties are like yours. So this has a huge effect on value. To give you some benchmarks here, like these are 2 benchmarks. But Nanaimo has a ratio of 16 to 1. Parksville has a ratio of 30 to 1. Qualicum has a ratio of 21 to 1. So those are some real active real estate markets that when they build them, they will come. And those vacant lots are absorbed really quickly. Okay?
Question.
Yeah.
When you say the vacant parcels, 94 for Tofino, did you say they cannot be built on? Or
No,
that those,
I don't know whether they can be built on or not, whether there's water issues or septic issues. Those are just the number of vacant lots.
okay.
Okay? I haven't done that deep of analysis, but that would be a good one to do. Someone could get a master's degree on that kind of stuff. My wife went through a master's degree, and I don't want one. Tofino. This is a 2016 enroll assessment change. 68% of the properties fell between a range of 0 and 20%. So that means 32% fell outside that range for a number of different reasons. New construction, fires, stuff like that. 62% of the commercial properties increased from 0 to 10%. Single-family dwellings. On the 2015 roll, the median single-family dwelling in Tofino was assessed at $463,000. This year, it rose to $509, an increase of 10%. That's single-family dwellings. Okay, that's in Class 1. There are other properties that are in Class 1, apartment buildings, mobile home parks, mobile homes, acreage, over 2 acres that are improved or vacant, strata condominium properties. 5-year trend, that's quite a turnaround. 5 years prior to the 2016 roll, this is reflective of the entire residential class, all those different property types besides houses. The residential roll grew by 5% last year due to the market. And as you can see, the previous 4 years was all in decline. That's a similar shape to assessment change that we've seen in a lot of communities on the island. In a lot of urban communities, like municipalities, and a lot of rural communities, like Shawnigan Lake area. I know the statistics really well because I've gone through Park a number of times on that water issue that they have. Not the water issue, the soil contamination issue. But this is the exact same trend that we've seen in a lot of communities. A bit of a turnaround happening. Let's hope. Fingers crossed. Because you might say, well, why would I want my assessments to go up? Well, this is reflective of reality as well. This is the market value of people's homes, condos, acreage, and it builds wealth. Commercially, again, a 5-year high, went up a little bit last year, but the 3 years prior to that were years of decline. The assessment roll, yes.
Can I look at that last
Yeah, for
one?
sure.
This is the commercial market.
I can give this to all of you afterwards if you want to keep it for prosperity. The assessment roll changes in 2 ways. The assessment roll changes market forces, as the market suggests, and we're completely following what's happening in the market. We're not making this stuff up. Or it can change through the non-market. And the non-market is people building houses, developers creating small lots. Zoning changes create non-market change. Communities that expand into rural areas, that's a non-market change. Exemptions that are applied or removed can be either a negative to non-market or a positive to non-market if you're yanking an exemption. A finance manager once told me, he's now retired, non-market change is the gravy on your chips when you're on BC ferries. Municipal councils love non-market change. Municipal councils usually adjust their mill rate to reflect the change in the assessment roll due to market. But when they're looking at the non-market change, they go, this is new construction, this is new assessment that I can apply that same mill rate to, and I can create new services to the public. I can build new roads. I can build new schools, stuff like that. Non-market change is the ability to gain more. That's why municipal councils like it. Well, I want to go back to this slide here, because I forgot to say something. 509, 463, however you slice it, that's a really high median selling price, or median assessment price for a house. That's the kind of, in Nanaimo, I think, is probably in the 300 range. 350, 375, somewhere in there, 380. That's really high. And it's what people are willing to pay, because again, it's the market that shows the assessments. It's what people are willing to pay for houses in Tofino.
So Bill, pardon me for interrupting,
Yeah.
not to be rude to you, Pulip, but if you can flip through
Sure.
fairly quickly, we're running out of time.
Yeah, you bet. Similar range values, median 272,000, which is a lot lower than what you see in Tofino. It's 11% increase. Residential market change in Ucluelet, same type of a process here. 4 years of decline with a bit of a jump in this year. So it's following the same pattern. Commercial, exactly the same pattern as Tofino as well. Non-market change, consistently, this year about $4 million. I believe Tofino's was about $10 million. So when you look at those total assessment rolls, those are comparative numbers. Now I'm going into the accommodation industry, which is a real, I don't have to tell you, it's one of the strongest industries in both of these communities. In Tofino, there are 7 full-service hotels. And on the 2015 roll, they had a combined value of $62 million. On the 2016 roll, $58 million, which is a decline of about 7%. When we value hotels, what we do is we send out income and expense requests to hoteliers all throughout the province. And a lot of them, about 40% of them, give us their financials. And we look at those financials, we compare them for the last 3 years so that we can see trends, and we can average things out. And we change assessments based on the last 3 years of data for each individual property. For hoteliers that don't provide us with the information, they get lumped in with what the trends are from the people that do. If they appeal their assessment, the first thing we say is, did you send in your financial data? No? Well, you better, because we're going to just confirm the assessment if you don't. Or we'll tell the appeal board to confirm the assessment. And usually those appeal people say, yeah, you don't send us the financials, the assessment sticks. There are no full-service hotels in Ucluelet that are owned in the traditional manner of one property, one owner. Okay? Motels. Motels in Tofino, there's 11. $13 million in 2015 roll, 2016 roll, 14.2. The average room rate, or the average room assessment per room, 60,000 to 65,000, which is an increase of 8%. Motels are valued the same as hotels. Give us your financials, we'll analyze them, we'll make the assessment changes. In Ucluelet, there's 11 motels as well. 9 million to 9.5 million. 38,000 a room to 40,000 a room. An increase of about 6%. So you can really see those average, those median assessments, 509 in Tofino, 272 in Ucluelet. And the equivalent is the same. Tofino motels have a higher value per room on their assessment roll than Ucluelet. Then there's the third type of property, hotels, motels, strata accommodation properties. Doesn't roll off the tongue like that song, motel, hotels. In Tofino, there are 3 strata properties. In Ucluelet, there are 5. A strata accommodation property, by definition, is a hotel that's separated into strata units. They have multiple owners in most cases. There is a very a defined set of legislation around strata accommodation properties. Why does a hotelier stratify? A hotelier stratifies because when he sells off those units, he can sell them for a way higher amount than if they were owned in the traditional fashion of one owner, one hotel. Ocean Village, 40 units, has an assessment of $180,000 per unit. Pacific Sands, $298,000 per unit. Cox Bay, $354,000 per unit. Pacific Sands, as a larger hotel, has more than 19 units, but they are kind of a mixed breed of hotel where most of the hotel is owned by, in the traditional matter, but when the Pettingers built these 19 units, they also stratified them as well. Ucluelet, Terrace Beach, 176. Blackrock, 241,000. Whiskey Landing, 162. Moorage, 268. Water's Edge, 173. The big,
Ask a
yeah.
question? Yeah, so in the normal course of things, like we have hotels falling under commercial,
yeah.
are strata accommodations in municipalities tending, are they taxed as a...
That's a great question, and you took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
There is a declining scale in classification, and it's all because of legislation. Hotels are in Class 6. Motels are in Class 6. There may be one unit per motel in Class 1. It's usually the manager's suite. But they're pretty well all in Class 6. Strata accommodation properties have a real mixed legislation around them. And I call it the bum in the bed theory, the bum in the bed legislation. Every year, we send out letters to all of the strata accommodation property owners, usually just their managers. Like BlackRock, there's 133 different owners. We just send it to the BlackRock manager. And we say, tell us who's sleeping where. The legislation says, if there is no bum in that bed, Class 1. If the owner's bum is in the bed, Class 1. The first 36 nights of someone else's bum in the bed besides the owner, Class 1. The number, the guests, the number of nights that guests are in that hotel suite, less the first 36, that's Class 6. So it's based on a percentage of what people are telling us the occupancy is. And if they don't tell us what the occupancy is, it goes 100% Class 6. So we got a real hammer. If they don't declare, too bad, so sad, you're being treated like everyone else in the hotel business. So to give you some ideas here, Ocean Village, I believe, is owned by the same company. And the legislation says if you got one owner, 100% is in Class 6. So Ocean Village is 100% Class 6. Pacific Sands. Pacific Sands falls within this sweet spot in the legislation that says if you have less than 20 units, you're 100% Class 1. So they built 19. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. Cox Bay, 43% in Class 1.
Sorry, in the 19 units example,
Yeah.
even if they had more than 36 nights of bumps and beds,
Yeah.
it'd still be Class 1.
If there are less than 20 units, it's Class 1. And that's in the strata plan. I know the Pacific Sands has a whole bunch of units over here about owned in fee simple, but doesn't matter. Legislation is legislation. So 100% Class 1, 43% Cox Bay. Class 6. Okay? The owner of Cox Bay is declared. Ucluelet, Terrace Beach, 100% Class 1, because they're grandfathered. They changed the legislation back in 2008. They're grandfathered. There's grandfathering legislation. BlackRock, this year, 42% Class 6. Last year, it was 30%. The year before, it was 30%. which would suggest that BlackRock's occupancy is increasing quite substantially over a 1-year period. Whiskey Landing, owned by one individual or one company, and there's only 15 units of hotels units, but there's another 6 or 7 of commercial units. So they have more than 20 units as a group. That's 100% Class 6. Moorage, 60% Class 6. They have a very high accommodation rate, the Moorage. And Water's Edge is 0% Class 6. They're just like Terrace Beach grandfathered. So you can see the decline here. Hotels, Class 6. Motels, Class 6. Strata accommodation properties, a mixed bag. What's the next rung on the accommodation property index? Anyone got any guesses? Well, before that. Oh, yeah.
Hostels.
No. How about B&Bs? B&Bs are in direct competition with hoteliers. There is no legislation around B&Bs. We have policy on B&Bs, and the vast majority of B&Bs are 100% Class 1. If you have to be a substantial B&B to get any portion of your assessment in Class 6. Seasonal rentals, there is no legislation around seasonal rentals. And we have no policy around seasonal rentals. They are entirely Class 1.
When you say seasonal rentals, you mean nightly as well?
Like
Like a short-term rental?
a short-term rental, let's say a week.
Yeah.
A week, yeah. Campgrounds are kind of, we treat differently. They actually they're considered to be recreational properties. So their land is in Class 8 and their improvements are in Class 6. Recreational is Class 8. Yeah. There's a defined set of statutes. So I know that seasonal rentals, I'm not dumb, I know that seasonal rentals is a hot topic in a lot of communities. My family has a 45-year history on Hornby Island. We have a cabin, we actually have 4 in a row. And people on Hornby Island are really angry about seasonal rentals. Why? Well, all these people come to the island and they mess things up in the summertime. And on Hornby, there's the water issue. You know, these people come in and they shower for an hour. And it's our aquifer. So there's water issues as well with seasonal rentals. The Islands Trust is struggling with this issue. And they come to BC Assessment, and BC Assessment goes, we have no legislation around the classification of seasonal rentals. They are considered to be residential properties. If you wish to choose that or change that legislation, you need to bring that forward to government. And it's the Ministry of Community, Recreation, and Culture who is the purveyor of most of our legislation. And the steps to do that, your spokesman for government is the UBCM. I heard you guys talking about that too. But don't forget, the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Conference is before that in Nanaimo, where you bring forward your ideas. And you vote there on which ones will then get sent to the UBCM, I believe. Is that the proper process?
That's right.
Yeah. So if this is a hot topic for you, you need to bring it forward through those avenues. And you need to think about the positives and the negatives. Okay. Here's the big pie for the Alberni Clayoquot. Vast majority is Alberni. Tofino 16%. Euclid is, I can't see. It's small. Here's the last slide. Here's appeal history for the last 10 years or so. In the 2006, 2002, this is a very active market. Values were increasing substantially. 2% was our appeal rating. 2% of the property owners in the province were upset about their assessment to the point where they appealed. In 2014, for the first time ever, we went under 1%. City of Calgary, I have an unconfirmed report that their first level of appeal is around 20%. So at 1%, we're doing pretty good. Last year was just over 1%. This year, on the 2016 roll, our inquiries during January, provincially, were about 20% higher than the year before. And the result in appeals was less than last year. And don't forget, in some communities in Vancouver, we saw 30-40% increases in people's assessments for houses. And yet, our appeals went down from the year before. I think that's because of innovative and collaborative ideas like eValue BC, which lets the population investigate their assessment more thoroughly. I'm done.
Thank you.
I'm here for questions.
Okay. No, let's do it,
No.
Questions for more? Yeah, please.
Thank you. In Tofino, the property values, it's pretty uneven. And in the sense that we have high property values where there's a lot of
Waterfront.
waterfront and so forth, and,
Yeah.
well, mostly beach waterfront.
Yeah.
But we're a small community, so when you talk about medians, just how across, like, do you take those high values across the entire board, or do you isolate them into areas of high value property and everything else?
Typically what we do is there's a number of statistics that you can use. You can use average, median, or mode. And the average is you sum them all up and you divide by the number. And that's how you get the average. A median, on the other hand, is you rank them from lowest to highest, and then you statistically find the middle. There's 100 properties. What is the number between the 50th and the 51st property? So by using the statistic median, you are getting out of, you're taking away some of the effect of those higher value properties. Much more than if we were using an average statistic. So that's why we choose medians in the first place.
Okay, so let's say we've got these tens of millions of dollars of commercial properties
Yeah.
in the accommodation sector on beachfront, and then you have your commercial downtown probably not even reaching that level of value
Mm-hmm.
total. So, because it's just in terms of thinking about the area for economic development.
Yeah.
Or other things, it's just, we've been told that the price per square footage of rental is very high in the downtown, and yet we're not seeing, new building. I mean, not much has changed
No.
downtown for a very, very long time, yet assessments have gone up, and, it's kind of confusing because from the sense of how do you kind of try and attract development in the downtown core.
Yeah.
And, and things may be skewed from an assessment point of view.
Yeah.
It's hard to-
Well, don't forget the assessments are entirely based on what the market is.
Yeah, and
What
so.
people are selling for, what people are buying for, what people are leasing property for. So it's all based on the perception of the marketplace. So to suggest that we should lower assessments to create economic development isn't part of the game
Well,
plan.
one of the things is that the assessments happen based on movement. So what I'm saying is there is no movement except for maybe one or two isolated instances
Yeah.
of movement, maybe where resorts are buying properties because they need them for housing or
Yeah.
whatever, and they can, because that's where the concentration of wealth is kind of coming from
Yeah.
for the most part. So nothing else is moving, but the assessments are kind of being
Well, that's where the market is.
laying
though.
over.
You have other tools available for you as a community. You have the community charter where you can give revitalization exemptions to properties, to neighborhoods that say, this area here, if you come and invest in this neighborhood, we'll give you a tax break.
Not going to happen in Tofino, I think, because when you think that we just increased 8% of our tax last year, and that came to $160,000.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Communities like Campbell River have used that revitalization exemption they've really leveraged it and created a lot of development in their downtown core. They've created Berwick Retirement Home. They've created the Seymour Development Office Building. They've created renovations to existing commercial properties. That is one avenue that you may wish to explore. It's not up to me. I'm just throwing it out there as a potential thing to take a look at. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
I do have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you, like many communities, we're struggling with the affordable housing issue. Do you have any insights from an assessment point of view on how to create affordable housing from existing stock or from new in a high-value market like Tofino?
Yeah. Well, there is that revitalization opportunity where you could say, here's the area. If you build an apartment building in this area, we will forgive your property taxes for the first 5-10 years. That property owner will still have to pay their portion of the provincial property tax bill, but there is that ability. You have the power of zoning in your back pocket, where you could designate certain properties to be of a certain zoning. You have municipal land that you could attempt. This is what the City of Vancouver is doing. They're saying, we have this land, feds, we have an affordable housing issue, perhaps we can make an arrangement here. There are opportunities. You have to think a little bit outside the box and rely less on the market and use the power that you have in your legislation to leverage. There's a couple examples. I'm no expert. It's all theory to me.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Bill,
Okay.
especially for all the information about strata accommodation.
It's confusing
That
stuff.
was new to me, so I'm sure it's new to
Well,
others.
the legislation had changed in 2008. And my theory is the more complex the legislation is, means how many people were involved in its creation. And it's confusing stuff for us. So that means a lot of people had their say in how it should change. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Safe travels home.
Thank you.
All right, our next delegation is Kristen Zoder from Tourism. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. Thanks for having me here today. I'm cognizant of your time and will try to speed through this as soon as I can. So as you know, we do like to come twice a year and just give you a little debrief about where we're at since the last time we've talked. So this is just going to be a quick overview about our updates and commitments since we last spoke in November. So first looking at Tourism Tofino's goal alignments with what the District of Tofino has identified in the Tourism Master Plan, the Festival and Event Strategy, the RMI and community project promotion opportunities for this year, and with regards to the resort development strategy specifically. I want to point out and highlight the purpose that's been redefined under the new MRDT guidelines that were released in September. Talk a little bit about opportunities for visitor-facing local message development, because we heard you loud and clear that was very important from this table to ours. I'll give you a quick peek at the draft budget, although there'll be a more robust report coming, and just give you a sneak peek at some of the campaign samples that we've got in market effective this week. And then I'm going to close off with some key dates and project timelines that we need to be looking at together in order to achieve some of these deadlines that are coming down. So, first of all, the Tourism Master Plan alignment. Some of the things that are well underway are inclusion in the Made in Tofino program. So this supplements the Chamber's Buy Local initiatives, and we're working to integrate unique local themes across all of our campaigns. So this is an example of what like, say, our Christmas campaign looked like, using that Made in Tofino branding to talk a little bit more to the types of guests that might want to be seeking an experience here as opposed to stuff. So integrating our brand standards for visitor-facing applications where it was appropriate. So as you've seen on the shuttle and also with those new event banners, for example. We're sharing indicators of high-quality visitor experiences that we're getting through different market research tactics that we've employed. We added a new value add campaign during off season in the wedding fair, and that was a huge success, and it looks like we're going to go forward with that being an annual event. And stakeholder engagement sessions were held in November to reveal our latest visitor experience data, and then we did another just recently in February with the marine sector to talk about how we can be coming together collectively across different sectors for different themes like media support, for example. In progress, we're working towards phase 2 of the Made in Tofino branding, so this is going to live permanently on our new website that we're looking to refresh in the fall. Preparations for visitor-facing communication platforms are underway, so we see this as sort of an ongoing, in-progress project over time as different issues arise that we need to address. We're going to continue to collect this visitor experience survey information. We're currently in our 4th round of data collection right now, actually, and that'll take us right through to the end of June. And we're actively considering our options for improvements to the visitor center out at Cox Bay and also here downtown. Looking a little farther ahead, in the vein of the higher learning initiative and our learning opportunities, just how we can integrate promoting educational opportunities better into what we're doing. And then ideally, if we're actively considering improvements to Cox Bay right now, we'd like to implement those improvements the next 1 to 3 years. And all of this is going to have to fall under our next 5-year business plan and strategic plan in 2017 through 21. Specific to festival and event strategy and how we want to align with the district's goals, we did a lot of work together with Catherine Loisel and Mo this year to make sure that our marketing support policy aligned with yours and your strategic priorities. We've got this new festival and event logo and a dedicated URL, eventsinTofino.com. That was actually one of the impetuses for improving our website this fall. EventsinTofino.com will have new life breathed into it when we refresh our website. Our current event listing just isn't doing justice to all of the things that we have going on here, and we want to look at that. We're committed to our seat at the table with that event advisory group. We're hosting those meetings and providing communication support. I do want to highlight, I think it's important that we publicly acknowledge actually the work that Catherine is doing to link our two organizations. This is a communication link that has proven very, very beneficial to us. Looking at some of the challenges with this, however, our 2016 intake process was and is still ongoing and has proven quite challenging. So to date, we are processing 22 support applications. We've provided over $75,000 in cash support for event-specific requests through those applications. And we've also integrated over $100,000 of in-kind support for planned campaigns that will integrate festival messaging. And generally that's when we cluster different themed messaging about similar festivals and events together. So we are going to make some further changes to improve our support criteria for 2017, because this current process that we're in right now still requires a lot of individual event support and negotiation, and that's actually decreased our efficiency a little bit at one of the most crucial times of year for us for planning.
Could you just elaborate, what does intake process mean?
So we set a deadline on December 15th. So every festival and event coordinator was welcome to apply for marketing support for their festival or event. And where we had asked for different metrics that we have to then report back on in any given year as far as ability to increase visitation and how are they going to track that, and where are your key markets and how are you going to identify those, and what are you doing within your own organization to promote your event that we can then leverage or amplify. So we got applications that ranged right from sort of like dog walking events right up to, let's use the Tofino Food and Wine Festival as an example. Something that's very obviously driving visitation on a weekend because of the event. So where we didn't see the issue arising was going to be that how we support those events is going to look very differently, and that going into this, we know that there's going to be a very base level of support that we can provide to some events that don't maybe have a direct ability to drive visitation, which has to be at the core of what we do. And then others, how we're going to manage integrating that messaging into what we're already doing to make it relevant to the types and kinds of visitors that we'd like to see here at those times of year. So this is how we see fitting into the 2016 RMI project promotion. I've just identified 3 sort of key areas here. As far as transit goes, we've previously invested in graphic design and print costs to revitalize the look and feel of the bus itself, and we've prepared new schedules, wrap cards, etc. We're committed to promoting ridership via social media promotion of services, and I think strong district and Tourism Tofino communication will ensure awareness of services for new long weekend and for event shuttles. New vinyl graphics and bus stop signage is recommended, although we don't budget for those types of things because those are more of a production thing. So where we can still help out with things like rack cards and graphic design, I will be kind of working with April on some of those other things that are more infrastructure related. Looking at the downtown vitalization, there's a lot of opportunity for SIC with social media and blog promotion, bringing attention to things that we've done in the past with the Bike Skills Park or the skate park. Any animation going on at the Village Green, for example. And we enjoy having a role in helping engage visitors with Chestertown. So being downtown is important to us during that sort of high foot traffic time of year. We are seeking feedback and a timeline about next steps for how we can be behind some of the Main Street improvements, how the district would like to see us bringing those things forward. With regards to beach and trail access, those are arguably 2 of the most inspirational reasons that people visit the area. But we're cognizant of some sensitivities here, and by the same token, we're kind of obligated to provide accurate and obvious information to visitors about those things. So we're looking forward to the improvements in signage and parking and other things at Hellison. We've already included reference to those improvements now on our new 2016 map, for example, and through our website. The trailheads are all featured on a dedicated trails landing page on our website and also in our printed Discover Guide. So we're looking forward to things like new signage and identification markers at the beaches and the trailheads and how we can play a role in highlighting that for our visitors and residents. We do see an opportunity for beach and trail messaging input on a larger scale as we look forward to this website refresh. So looking at the resort development strategy alignment, we're keeping these 3 goals top of mind in everything that we do, understanding that the district's priorities or the community priorities, I guess, are to increase awareness of Tofino's eclectic nature, enhance visitor experience and satisfaction, while interacting with the natural environment and supporting active local tourism assets through development and enhancement of visitor communications. So for goal 1 here, the key objective obviously is to develop visitor amenities that promote Tofino's unique arts and cultural experiences year-round. So where Tourism Tofino has a role to play there is increasing cultural awareness. Currently our focus has been on festival and event promotion that feature cultural themes, and also stakeholders that offer authentic cultural experiences. Those are messages that Tourism Vancouver Island, the province, Destination Canada all want to see us digging into as well. We only actively promote shoulder and off-season visitation, as you know, with the goal of enhancing that authenticity of a visitor's experience. There is an expectation from locals and the visiting public that local organizations will promote their own initiatives, and then our role there is to amplify that. Tourism Tofino features local art in our promotional tools. We incorporate artwork and media gifts. We highlight things like the boardwalk and other art installations via our social media feeds, and we're working with the Chamber on creating better guidelines around an artisan membership, which we hope to entice more artisans with and without storefronts to work with us on. That's always a challenge for us when we want to integrate, a specific medium or something. Like, let's use Daniela Petosa, for example. If there was a way that we wanted to include some of her beautiful pottery and maybe a media gift or something, it becomes very difficult when that person is not actively engaged with at the same level that, say, the Mark Hobson Gallery or something is. Like there's just that different level of involvement, and so we're just trying to bridge that gap and find a way to integrate all levels of that. So we do hope to showcase the eclectic art and design of Tofino in whatever ways possible for the visitor center improvement at Cox Bay and downtown. Under Goal 2, enhancing visitor experience and satisfaction, that's obviously at the core of what we try to do through our visitor experience program. We always are promoting waterfront views. That's kind of what we do. We've also featured new Windy Hill View and Anchor Park viewpoints, even the Chesterman washroom upgrades, those kinds of things as they come forward. And we do see some opportunities for Main Street once that's all put back together again. We pride ourselves on key messaging and capturing appropriate visuals along this vein. But all told, let the record show that Cox Bay Visitor Center is neither memorable nor accessible, as identified in this goal, in the context of visitor experience and satisfaction, and we do hope that the district is keen to work with us on improving this. This last goal here about supporting active local tourism assets. The key objective here is to raise awareness of local and regional tourism assets while promoting an active recreation lifestyle through enhanced visitor communication. So Tourism Tofino raises visitor awareness of local tourism assets such as our beaches and trails, festivals and events, funky shops, arts and food culture, and First Nations art and culture. We do this through our Made in Tofino initiatives, through social media support, through ads like this one in the Van Dock Cultural Guide, Tourism Vancouver Island Vacation Guide, Outdoor Guide, Culinary Guides, for example. We're always featuring members that operate in the Sound whenever possible. So to access trails, the Floating Garden, Oyster Farm tours, those kinds of things. Again, very much membership driven. We have to highlight those stakeholders that are actively engaging in our programs. We invest in programmatic targeting to entice those ideal visitors that have the behavioral affinities to active lifestyles and responsible travel values. And the visitor experience survey studies evaluate that satisfaction and perception of those visitors. We're exploring promotional opportunities that heighten awareness of youth activities in the area as well. For example, there's going to be a little bit more support behind a few different events that really embrace that sort of youth element this year, one being the Breweiler Kids Classic, the Queen of the Peak, Pacific Rim Whale Festival, and some Nature Kids programming. That was a win for us, I feel like, getting Nature Kids on board as a chamber member this year, because that's an amazing asset that we have here for our own kids, but it's also something that when there's visiting parents here, isn't that nice to be able to have that option where they could still go out for a kayak for the afternoon and know that their kids are really being immersed in what Tofino is all about while they're here. So I add this slide as a follow-on to those resort development strategy goals to ensure that while we keep those guiding goals top of mind when delivering our destination marketing commitments, that we have much more prescriptive guidelines than ever before and obligations to perform core destination marketing duties as outlined in our current agreement. These new MRDT guidelines to which we're bound going forward as we prepare for our next 5-year plan means more oversight and accountability to stick to our program goals as outlined in our business plan, which we've always focused on our primary goals of increasing visitation, delivering effective destination marketing, and managing visitor services. There's certainly some opportunity to expand our mandate within certain parameters when we engage in a new strategic planning cycle, but the yardstick on which our organizational effectiveness is measured will always be based on marketing effectiveness, visitation statistics, and financial performance in the eyes of the province, and we can't deviate from that purpose.
I'm sorry, was that what you just read in there somewhere?
No, sorry, I can read these bullet points if you like, but this is how.
You were just saying what's driving Tourism Tofino, but that's not in here, the program purpose. That's something that's here.
So the MRTT guidelines were refreshed in September of 2015. So they look a lot different than the 2011 interim guidelines from which we planned our 2012 5-year business plan off of. So I just wanted to point this out, that the province is really cracking down on DMOs right across the province to make sure that we are sticking to our core and fundamental purpose of destination marketing, and that we're going to be bound by these 4 principles under the new MRDT guidelines, that we have to be able to track our effectiveness as they relate to the metrics that are expected of us in our industry. So where we have a little bit of room to give on certain things, and I will get to that, we really have to make sure that destination marketing is at the core of what we do, and that we're not in a position to move to a whole destination management role necessarily. So now on to visitor-facing messaging, setting up some expectations and realities for our visitors, or the rules at the end of the road, if you will. While we don't necessarily see Tourism Tofino fully evolving into a destination management organization, as I said, we can modify our objectives under the new MRTT guidelines to include some in-destination messaging where it's appropriate. So questions and feedback are often received via the visitor center and online inquiries from potential visitors about local information gaps. Tourism Tofino will begin weaving some of this messaging into external communications as early as this summer. Some that are likely a bit more controversial, things like parking or camping, they'll be even more important to handle with a positive spin, graphics, and likely some humor. So that's where we feel like our voice can be lent to those otherwise sensitive issues. We've previously invested in messaging, design, and distribution of communications like rack cards, Tofino time ads, Our Town videos, Tough City radio ads, to refresh the Every Drop of Water Counts campaign when it was really important and crucial last year. There was some cash and in-kind design support earmarked in this year's budget as well for similar tools and message development this year to support our visitor experience program and the Tofino Ambassador program, which we feel is a good place for these things to live. So just looking at the reason I italicized possible is because, I mean, this is certainly not an exhaustive list of the kinds of things that we see needing to develop some message around, but these will be the things that are in progress, as I said, when and if they become issues. I mean, the water one was sort of crucial, and that trumped everything, right? So who knows what the issue of the day is going to be this summer, and we'll work with you on that as required.
Can I just add, you've got wildlife contact reporting, but I don't see anything you've got, et cetera, just meant flagging dogs.
So that's why I put pet control after
Sorry, did I miss that? Okay.
wildlife attractants and pet control.
Oh, pet control, there we go. Sorry.
Yeah, we don't want to be the poop police any more than you do, but I think that there's a way that we can, this is where this sort of programmatic targeting that I keep coming back to fits into. If one of our visitors that we're tracking online, we know that they've gone to a PetSmart website and purchased dog bags, and then they've gone to Pacific Sound's website to look at possibly coming here, we can totally target them with ads that make sense to that person, you know? So I'm certainly not going to put that on the brochure, but we have opportunities through technology in ways that we didn't have before that it might make sense. So as I said, formal budget report's still forthcoming, but in advance of this, I just wanted to point out that due to a 29% increase in our MRDT dollars in 2015, combined with our formal Capital Visitor Centre Fund officially being rejected by the province as an acceptable reserve fund, we're carrying forward approximately $330,000 into 2016. While we've integrated $130,000 of that surplus into the 2016 budget as an opportunity to invest in new digital assets, production, and budget for the 40% exchange rate for paid advertising in the U.S. market, we've chosen not to spend the entire surplus this year and instead intend to use this for future marketing in 2017 and beyond. While we watch market conditions, oil prices, and travel patterns in key markets in Alberta, Washington, and California that are affected by said conditions, it would be irresponsible to spend the entire amount in a year that appears to be as strong as 2015 for visitation to date. The 2017 business plan will identify spending policies as they relate to future surpluses or deficits.
Oh, sorry, just one more second. So the total program development and investment, 33,000. Okay, thank you. Or 81.
Sorry, what?
81. It's gone up to
Where are you looking
81,000.
for?
And the program development and investment. And
So this represents the contribution to the RMI Festival Services Assistant, and this is our carry forward surplus for future marketing. When you look at unassigned opportunity marketing, this is where we include festival support and RMI project support.
Okay.
We're certainly not earmarking $95,000 towards all of that, I should mention, but that's where it fits right now.
But I was just also looking under the program development and
That's just a total of these two numbers. So investment for future years, essentially. So moving on to new campaign developments. We're proud to note that we were one of only a few applications on the island that were 100% funded for our new Real West Coast campaign. And Destination BC has identified this as a net new campaign, and as such, we'll have access to provincial branding and assets not yet widely available as part of the new provincial co-op marketing program. So that's the community consortium that includes Tofino, Parks Canada, Ukulele, and Port Alberni. I should also note that both the Real West Coast and Share VI will become the main campaigns for 2016 and 17. So our traditional Tofino-specific seasonal themed campaigns that have historically featured whales and marine, culinary, surf, storm, those will mainly be broadcast and digital focused, while we focus on our 5-year planning cycle that will identify and assess new opportunities at appropriate times of year. That means we're likely moving to 1 or 2 high impact and high frequency campaigns per year with those original core themes in mind, and then of course that we always sort of color with that cultural undertone. And that's going to be on a rotating basis based on changing market conditions year over year. We found that over the last 5 years, committing ourselves to running these 4 or 5 theme campaigns that just run right up to one another year over year has just put a lot of pressure on us as far as deadlines and deliverables, and we think that we could be a lot more effective doing something with a longer reach, higher frequency, and it's a little bit more malleable based on market conditions year over year. So that said, while we look ahead to refreshing our campaign cycles in the off-season, we felt it important to still embrace and support the marine sector, just in a different way this year. And so as opposed to focusing on whale watching and marine tours in a really obvious way, like we've done in past year, we're focusing on this sort of natural environment and the biodiversity in Clackamas Sound. So these are examples of how our evolving messaging, like learning opportunities, are plentiful in Tofino while still celebrating the biodiversity visitors can experience in the region and our connection to Clackamas Sound. So we shared this out with the Clackamas Biosphere Trust earlier this week, and they're really pleased with this, and I think it's just going to create another vein for people to be interested in what we have going on here. And as I said, it allows us to really target the kinds of guests that are going to come here and truly appreciate Tofino for what it is. So this is almost my last slide. Just looking ahead, as I said, to key dates and some projects and notes. We've got our AGM coming up on March 30th. And then a couple of weeks after that date, still to be determined, we're going to have a special general meeting in Mixer with our members to update them on some changes that will be happening from a governance perspective this year. I have a report due to do with our annual performance report. Well, Nyla has it due, so I owe her that information before that date. Looking ahead to September 1, this is really the deadline that I wanted to point out. If we were to, say, change our rate of tax or any other fundamental piece of our 5-year fixed roof accommodation provider willingness to collect the MRDT in Tofino, that 5-year business plan and MRDT application would need to happen with a 9-month lead time. We are sort of considering, and because I won't likely appear for another delegation before the fall, I just wanted to highlight this September 1 deadline and prepare you for an official ask now in advance of more specific strategic planning and stakeholder engagement and support. It is the will of the board to prepare the next business plan and apply for the additional 1% MRDT contingent on approval for a capital project, specifically to replace the Cox Bay Info Center. So I just wanted to mention that today, that we are going to prepare that 5-year business plan with that intent in mind, that extra 1% that we are looking to collect from the FRAPs with their support and stakeholder engagement in support of that it would be dedicated to begin replacing that building out at Cox Bay. The board is not interested in pursuing that additional 1% if the province is not in support of us building that facility. We realize that an extra 3%, while it would keep us more competitive with other destinations from a marketing perspective, it doesn't make sense while RMI and other things are up in the air to support what that additional marketing would look like. So it is contingent. I just want to be very clear about that, that we don't want to go forward with that ask unless we have an assurance that that's an option. If that's not going to happen, or that's not the will of this council for some reason, because it is the council that always has to apply to the province for that application, we would require 6-month lead time, in which case that deadline then changes to December 1st for renewal applications. But I, again, would just be perfectly clear that there's no option to revisit any of those 3 bullet points during that 5-year time. We can't decide in a couple of years that we do want to change that rate of tax. We can't redraw any boundaries to include a new offshore resort that might be built outside of the municipal boundaries. And if there was any reason why we wanted to change the designated recipient or eligible entity status of where those tax dollars were being collected and distributed to, that can't change within that 5-year window either. So that wraps it up for me. If anyone has any questions or conversation, I do want to thank you again. You know, I always welcome that opportunity to kind of check in and share what's growing and changing with Tourism Tofino. And so I invite any questions or comments if you have them.
Thanks very much. It's always, pleasure is the wrong word. It's always just highly stimulating to hear what you guys are doing. You're one of the real high-functioning organizations in town, and it always astonishes me at how much you're doing and how well you're doing it. Just some questions I jotted down during your presentation. Is there a green element to any of your branding? Like Tofino is known as a green town. It's arguable as to how much we deserve that, but are you incorporating that at all?
So it's funny, even just the way you qualified that statement, because this campaign that we're running right now, some of the messaging in it was really featuring, you know, how pristine and things that, and we modify that a little bit, as I said before, about expectations and reality. We don't ever want to set our community up for a situation where we're putting out there something that we are, you know, following every best practice, and that the world should be looking at us from, with a best practice lens. If there are some things that could come back to bite us, and you know, I always look at the sort of the trolls online as that thing. You know, we post an article about how wild and pristine and amazing Tofino is, and then somebody inevitably is going to come back and say, yeah, but you're still flushing all your sewage into your harbor. Those kinds of things, you know. We're cognizant of that, but at the same time, I actually have a meeting on the docket to meet with the Surf Rider Foundation. They've got some really great ideas that they want to bring forward about things that we can incorporate into some of our messaging. And a lot of that comes back to sort of how we can encourage our guests to be as responsible as the people who live here are when they're here interacting with us. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the most wild and natural places out there, regardless of what the small percentage of trolls might say, just to be difficult. So we're always going to feature that in everything that we do.
Thank you. So I concur with what Councillor Blanchette said about the amazing amount of output and quality of the work that's done. It's really impressive. So
Thank you.
just thank you for that. So I will talk about a couple of considerations I have that kind of come out of the meeting that we had, the joint meeting of the Council and Tourism Tofino. And you know, we're sitting in the budget process, and I keep looking at certain things and think, you know, the screen that I put through is what's the reasonable expectation of residents to pay for this service that's driven by basically visitation. And one of the places that comes up very powerfully is bylaw, where we can have a bylaw department that does things like business licenses and dogs controls and all the kind of normal things, but actually we really kind of expand and beef up to kind of manage uses of the beaches and so on and so forth. And so we had talked about potentially kind of beach ambassadors, or maybe working with our staff to see if you know, this 75,000 that we're looking at increasing, there's a place that Tourism Tofino can identify a role of, you know, that could relieve some of that cost burden to the taxpayers and still be doing a kind of marketing delivery message. I know that, you know, it depends on what you call marketing, but, you know, the word of mouth experience and things. I know up at, for example, Whistler, I think Whistler Blackcomb, they hire people to greet people just on the streets and talk to them about their experience. You know, they consider that a valuable piece of their marketing because they want to ensure that people have the best experience there, word of mouth and all those other things. So I'm very interested to know what considerations have happened on that front, because we did talk about it at the meeting.
Yeah, can I speak to that before? Okay, so that meeting, you know, we've talked about before, like it's always great to get together and sort of air ideas and brainstorm and collaborate on things that would work. No specific ask or action or any action items sort of came from that meeting necessarily to our table for consideration, and it's not in the existing 5-year plan, as I, you know, outside of to say that we support visitor services. And you may have noticed in the budget, or you will when you see the fuller budget report, that, you know, we're spending upwards of near 20% in a lot of years towards our visitor experience program already. And that's the kind of thing that supports the ambassador program, that pays our info counselors, that keeps the lights on, and all of the pieces that have to do, like the functional pieces that have to do with actually managing visitor services. In talking to Sarah Timberlake, and she wanted to be here today but is on trade show duty in Calgary right now, Tofino's being looked at by the province as a very good example as far as case studies go for our visitor experience program as it stands right now. At some of the conferences and things that she attends through the Visitor Center Network that Destination BC runs, they've looked at case studies where roving ambassadors have been identified and they don't work. Like not one of these business cases that they've been able to identify have they found that there's been any kind of measurable impact through that. So that was one thing that Sarah specifically wanted me to bring forward today when I discussed that with her, because I was sort of pre-asked that may come up today. And I think where we found more value, rather than having additional paid employees, because we already know that we can't count on those summer student grants. They don't work with our timeline. We end up not getting the perfect person for the job early enough in the year because of the timelines of those summer student grants. So we've already had to up-level our investment in wages this year for the visitor experience program as it is, and it is going to be difficult to staff the 2 visitor centers that we already have. So there's no more people available to do that. That's one piece of it. The other part of it, though, is that we've instead really gotten behind the ambassador program in a different way this year, where we feel like we have a better chance of reaching new residents to town, new frontline staff that are here to live and breathe and work in Tofino. And by retooling those resources in order to help them be our ambassadors within the community, that's going to have a lot more impact. So we're committed to redoing or assisting in redoing the curriculum with TAP so that it does have a really community-centric and customer-centric approach. So everything that is being instructed at that table now, and we have the opportunity to reach probably 1,000 or more TAP participants this year based on projected numbers. I just think that that's a far more effective way, where if we're setting the tone with all of the new people coming to town about the world host sort of theme, that's going to be a more effective way of getting that message out there.
Thank you. So that's encouraging, and whatever way, either diminish the problem or, you know, up the enforcement, but whatever way it is, we have to somehow find ways to manage some of the behavior, or try to influence the behavior rather. So thank you. That's great in sense of partnership. the other, so there's two other things around festivals. You said the $75,000 cash into the festivals, is that like directly for building up their capacity as a?
No, we're not allowed to spend MRDT dollars on those kinds of things. The $75,000 cash is specific asks that festivals came to us and said, I want to place a full page ad in this publication. I'd like to have broadcast inclusion on this network. We'd like to create a guide that's going to be distributed through these communities through newsprint. Those kinds of things that were specific asks that came that were directly related to marketing that we funded at like fully or partially to about $75,000 mark. And then the in-kind piece are all the other kinds of things where they may not have asked for our assistance, but we've identified opportunities where we can integrate what they're already doing really well to up-level their vision or their effectiveness of inviting people to their event.
Great. And I'll just say that I'm just continuing to look at ways in our budget that, we can find more synergy and still fit within the program, but my underlying concern always is how marketing is defined, and that just kind of influences what I think about. But anyway, that's
Okay. There's just one more thing, I guess. The thing that came along with those new MRDT guidelines is also a series of templates, both for applications, reporting, financial accountability. So we actually have a whole series of fill-in-the-blank reporting that we now owe to the province in any given year that has really, really defined what we can and cannot do with these dollars. And so where I agree with you that there is always opportunities for partnership and leveraging funds, and I hope that I've identified today and always how we're really trying to do that to the best of our ability within those parameters. We're still, for all intents and purposes, we are still competing with other destination marketing organizations in other areas of the province, and because that is at the core of what we are doing, what we have to be doing, Destination BC is looking to us to make sure that we're falling within those guidelines and ticking those boxes and filling out those reports the way that they want to see them. So I always have to make sure that whatever comes to us as an official ask, say, because you always have a seat at our table at our and that discussion is always very welcome. But anything that comes to us as an official ask has to be able to be measurable and supported by those parameters that the MRDP guidelines set out.
Well, then I just comment, there's the Destination Development Program by region. Are you aware of that?
It's part of the new. I don't want to speak too much to it because it is very new and we don't have a destination development officer here. I can see how this is playing out in places like Richmond and things like the destination development officer from Tourism Vancouver Island, for example, was just poached. She's now gone to the city of Richmond to wear that role. So I know that there's movement happening there. Where Tofino fits into that right now, I'm not 100% sure.
Sorry, but I'll save it for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Next, we're going to see the mass exodus from the gallery. Thanks for coming and listening, everybody.
Yeah.
All right, our next item is a piece of correspondence for information from Michael Bendel and Celeste Bendel. Thank you, Councilman Foster, second by Councilman Fairview. Any questions? Yes,
Is
Councilman.
there in fact a zoning application in process, or rezoning application in process, referring to what they're talking about?
We'll ask Aaron to speak to that. The shore rezoning for adding short-term rentals, is there a rezoning or an amendment process in place or an amendment undergoing?
There has been a rezoning application since 2011, and it's being paused with the half of the applicant while they decide what entity they have to bring back to the table. I've been in recent conversations with Council of the Strata owners and Ken Thompson, president of the Strata, in the last couple of weeks, but I don't have anything to report.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Answers your question, Councilman Blanchett?
Yes.
Okay, anything Okay, so moving into reports. We have a number of them. Our first one is the council remuneration benefits and expense reimbursement bylaw. And this is a item that council knows has been in the works for a while, and so staff has considered how to incorporate council's request for support for technology, and you see by the report in your package what it is. The suggestion, the recommendation is that each council be provided an amount of $500 in the first year of each council term to support the technology of their choice, and that the device, the cost and the support for that would then be borne by the council. And if it's adopted today, a prorated amount would come forward for the balance of this term. Councilor Anderson?
Sorry, would it just be retroactive?
No, it would
So
be
it would
prorated
start-
for the balance of the term.
I see,
Yeah.
okay.
Councilor St. Patrick?
Just how would this work in the sense, let's say, continue to work with the iPad? Do I have to buy a machine, or do I just get a $500 check? Or
It would be an allowance that if you own that iPad, and so you would receive the allowance if you continue to use that iPad or anything else that you provide.
Councilor Blanchett?
In terms of support, we have a number in NIMO, I believe it is, that we can call. Is that, or I have called it before, is that part of the support? What do you mean by support? Like support from district staff?
All support.
I think
So-
you can, I mean, for your council account, you can receive support from Introworks, but for your technology, whether it's an iPad or an IBM or whatever, that support wouldn't be forthcoming.
But if it comes to like setting up an email account on the technology of our choice, who do we turn to for something like that?
If it's setting up your municipal email account, then that's something that would be supported.
From staff?
I think through our service provider.
Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I'm not really very happy with this in two ways, but I appreciate that finally it's on the table at least to talk about. One is I don't think 500 is sufficient. Have a for price an iPad, it's closer to, 650, 700. So if you've got 650, and you get a piece of technology. I just bought a replacement computer, $1,500. This 500 doesn't come, and I basically am using this computer for all council stuff and committee work and research and all that kind of stuff. So, I just felt like, this is for the work we're doing, and it needs to be supported. Also, I don't agree with prorated. Like, if this is a term, when you buy a new computer or you have an account of that amount of money, and you can bring in your receipts to get your allowance or a reimbursement up to that amount of money. That makes more sense to me. So one, I'd like the amount changed to $750, and second, I'd like to drop the prorated, but just say within the term, and or up to the first 2 years or 3 years. It's a 4-year term now. So.
And third, you'd like it to be based on a receipt?
I think you should bring in receipts.
Okay, so a couple things there. So first of all, as it's outlined in the report, the $500 came from an estimate for an iPad Air. So I think the staff did their job and costed out an iPad Air. And I think that this is a council decision, so let's have a council conversation about this. We've had a few different expressions of opinions about the amount and what is a reasonable piece of technology to use. And I think the staff have done their job in that the technology that's been used over the last few council terms has been an iPad for the purpose of receiving council packages because of the decision made some years ago to go to a paperless agenda. And that there may not be it depends on each councillor as to how much email or writing or other things are being done and what the tool of choice is to use with respect to whether it's a computer or a pad. So council discussed, Councilor Bard has put forward a few ideas, and let's hear some opinion. Councilor Matson?
Well, I thought 500 was a little scarce. I believe that somebody said you should provide receipts. Like, I wouldn't, if I was on next term and this was still working, I probably wouldn't want another. And so I'd be happy not to get $500 or $750. But if it broke down, I'd want to get a new machine. So I think if you buy it, you should be able to buy the machine of your choice. And I think $500 is a little scarce because I know we all do things where we end up printing things out or doing it. That stationery, that printer, it mounts up over 4 years. So I'd say 750 would be a good number.
Okay, thank you. Others? Others?
I'd say maybe that 750, you could have 650 for hardware, software, and $100 would go towards printing paper costs or
I think
whatever.
to do that by receipt, we're starting to add some
Yeah.
administrative burden to staff that I really don't want to go down that road. But, Councilor Blanchette?
The remuneration bylaw refers to about a third of our stipend to cover things like printing and miscellaneous expenses.
Correct. I'll just get everyone who hasn't spoken first. Thank you, Councilor Durgan.
I agree with the 750, and I want to go back to Councilor Blanchett's question about who is the service provider, administrator service provider. Who is it? What's the number?
We can get that to you afterwards.
Okay,
Interworks
yeah.
and
All right.
Not something I've memorized. I hope that doesn't surprise you.
Okay, so Councilor, you're in agreement, are you suggesting you're in
Yes.
agreement with the 750? Okay. Councilor Anderson?
Well, I'm just wondering, that there seems to be a lot of talk about what number it should be. And the 500 number, I'm assuming it's, you can get something for $500 that covers receiving your agendas and doing your council emails. So that's sort of like the baseline, and I'm guessing that whatever extra memory on your unit, computer unit, or anything over and above that would be sort of luxuries, more than is actually required for council work. So I guess my point is, are we, to what extent are we providing a computer or tablet or whatever to councilors for council work, and then once you, where's that line? Is it at 750 or is it?
I think it's a matter of opinion.
Well, I guess, because, I mean, I think all councillors end up using computers for personal work, maybe business, personal business, as well as council things, and maybe whatever they buy should be partly funded by personal, fully funded by the district. So, I know that the surface units that didn't work out, but were provided were around $650, and those sort of.
I think they were a little less. No, do you recall? They're about 300.
About 300. So, and I mean, they had issues, but you can get. I think you can get lots of things for up to $500 that would cover council.
Okay, thank you. Just one question before we move back to Councilor Dart. If council wished to see the provision of a receipt, is that something that could be accommodated through this bylaw, or, okay, thank you. Councilor Dart?
Thank you. Yeah, couple of things. One, just about the paper and so forth, as has already been mentioned, that's covered off in a different place of printing, etc. But the information technology services, and then when I have my computer, I'm paid for somebody to sit down with me and set it and so be fluid so that I can download reports and copy and do all those things. So the 750 breaks down to like 175 a year. We have a 4-year term. I don't think that that's a hugely onerous ask for the work that happens. When I got an initial Mac, when I first came on council, so that would be 7 years ago, I didn't want to buy a new computer. I tried to upgrade this computer, and it wouldn't accept even the latest operating systems. It's just, these things do have a life, unfortunately. It's planned obsolescence, and it's still usable for some things, but it's just so not usable for others. And I expect that will be true of this thing as well. So, there's any point within a 4-year term that somebody might come up against that, and I think it's reasonable that this be an allowance that's applied to part of the job beyond the remuneration.
That's exactly what's on the table.
And so this idea, it's the first year of council term, except that's why I have a problem with it.
That
Could be
can be
month
changed.
13,
I'm sure that could be changed. I think that's a good suggestion as a starting point from the staff, as it is administratively easier to do. But I don't think that, I think we can, this is an amendment to the bylaw that we can consider where it could be any time during the term that with the provision of a receipt up to $750 once in the term, that a reimbursement could be given. Am I correct? And we could set it that way.
At council's discretion, I just, one of the things we would hope to avoid is 47 month and 48-month term, that we get a receipt and a request for a computer for someone that doesn't plan on running again.
Good point.
And that's the rationale for program.
Understood. Councilor Blanchett?
Can we compromise with keeping it, prorated after the first 2 years of the term? So I agree with using a receipt, because I personally would go mad trying to do this job on an iPad, but everybody else seems to have no trouble with it, with the exception of you, actually. But if I'm sensitive to Councilor Anderson's point that if a $500 gizmo will do the job, then anything that I want over and above that, I should pay for myself, and I'm more than willing to do that. So I agree with basing it on a receipt up to a certain maximum. I'm willing. I think 500 is good. I'm willing to push it up a little bit to meet Councilor Bart's points. But up until 2 years, you get a full reimbursement, and after that, it is prorated. Is that getting ridiculously complicated from a staff point of view?
Let me make a suggestion, because I really do think we should keep this simple and be mindful that we've deliberated this a billion times in this term, and we're trying to set policy for future terms too. Because we have a 4-year term, what about a $750 allowance within the first 2 years, once, and up to $750, that we're still within the 2 years of our term, and so anybody who goes out and buys a piece of technology today can have their reimbursement up to $750. And that way we avoid the problem of waiting till the 47th month and seeing somebody purchase a new piece of technology. And then you've got 2 years to make the piece from your previous term work, and if you can't, it doesn't last 6 years, you have the opportunity to buy something new. Would that be an acceptable compromise?
And what happens after the 2 years? You're prorated, or you're out of luck?
Well, I suggest you're probably out of luck, but just to make it simple, but it could be prorated, that's fine too. Prorated, yeah.
I think prorated, because computers can be dropped, they can break, they can
Okay.
cease to operate.
All right, so now I'm going to look at staff and say, is it simplest to ask you just to come back at the next council meeting with those amendments, or or those changes and a new updated report, or should we draft the amendment right now?
I think let's do it right now
Yeah.
and put this to bed.
Okay, I don't know where in the bylaws all of these things would go, but the point is that staff be authorized to prepare an amendment to the District of Tofino Council Remuneration Benefits and Expense Reimbursement Bylaw, 186/2013, by adding sections, to provide for the following: the provision of up to $750, accompanied by a receipt, for the reimbursement of technology within the first 2 years. It's the responsibility of the councillor to maintain the device and obtain at their cost information technology services, and that after the 2 years may not be prorated. That was a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
Heartily.
All right, any final discussion on that? Yes.
I don't know if this should be a second motion or effective the beginning of this term. I mean, some of us have been waiting for this remuneration policy and have had no choice but to go out and get new technology.
You'll have your receipt and you'll be able to get that. That's the way I read it, as long as the amendment's passed before October and
it'll be
provision
effective.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Any other final discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay. Next is the zoning amendment application for 511 Campbell Street, and big report in the package, but a number of recommendations coming forward from staff. Do you have the presentation, Aaron, or is it? Okay. So a couple of things we're going to do, consider here today. So first is that the zoning amendment bylaw itself is up for adoption, and then we go into the housing agreement bylaw, and there was a discussion at the last council meeting about some changes to make in the requirements for a refrigerator and an oven. So that will be done through rescinding, amending, and then reading the second and third time. So first, let's deal with the zoning bylaw itself.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any questions on that? All right, I will call the question then. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. So District of Tofino Zoning Amendment Bylaw 1203/2014 is adopted. Next is the matter of the housing agreement bylaw.
I'll move third reading.
Actually, we're going to rescind third reading and go back and amend. Are you moving to
Rescind.
rescind? Okay.
Rescind.
So Councillor McMaster then moves that third reading of the District of Tofino Housing Agreement Bylaw 1217/2016 be rescinded, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Is there any questions on that? All right, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. And then now would be the matter of amendment. And so the suggestion here is the change in the required size of a refrigerator and the change in the required size of an oven.
I move that third point of the recommendations.
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded that the District of Tofino Housing Agreement Bylaw 1217/2016 be amended at second reading by changing the required size of a refrigerator from a minimum size of 18 cubic feet to a maximum of 16 cubic feet, and changing the required size of an oven from a minimum width of 30 inches to a maximum width of 24 inches. Questions on this? Councillor Barton? Councillor Blanchette?
I'm assuming that staff has looked into this and that these figures, which seem incredibly precise, will just allow the provision that allow the builder to buy, source regular appliances. There's not going to be any special stuff required here. You can just go to the brick and get what you need.
Those are standard sizes, the 24 inch
Yeah.
and 18 cubic feet, yes.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice to create this maximum because as the previous bylaw said, for example, the 30 inch, and I think the intention was to allow latitude, for appropriate, assuming that this is going to be going forward as a kind of housing agreement, maybe it is adjusted each time, but the idea that when you're creating small space living, you have that option to a smaller size. The other place that didn't get mentioned concern was, and maybe, you know, you need to have a bathtub, but I'm thinking in a very small space, to have showers, not tubs, and that's not allowed for. It requires that there be a bathtub in this unit, and it's only 400 square feet. So again, in the same spirit, you know, it's kind of allowing that latitude to have the best use of space for living space and providing those amenity supports at the same time. Just don't know if there was a rationale for not making that change.
I think there is.
If I could speak to that, Your Worship. We looked at a few things. We looked at things like standards that BC Housing has, and you know, BC Housing does allow showers in their standards for housing that they're participating in. The construction standards that we used were taken from Whistler, and the rationale, as I recall it, is that once you allow a shower without a bathtub, you start to exclude people. So particularly, you start to exclude families. You know, with the description of a family being a single parent with a small child, it becomes difficult to live in a place that only has a shower. The other thing that we did was we contacted somebody with some experience in building affordable housing, who advised that the minimum shower size that they would consider is a 42 by 42. You end up saving 36 square inches compared to a 5-foot bathtub, so it didn't really seem to be a worthwhile saving in space to us.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll call the question on the motion. And all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. And then finally, third reading.
Move third reading.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Third reading as amended. Any final questions? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. All right. Moving on, development variance permits 01-16 for 700 Industrial Way. Did staff have any comment on this? Okay, we won't. Sorry.
Quick meeting, trying to be super efficient.
Good afternoon, good morning, Mayor and Council. Here's to give a very brief presentation on the Zilkin Development Variance Permit. I believe everybody has the report. Again, development variance permits are authorized under the Local Government Act. This is usually used to say 921, I think, and now it says 498 because the Local Government Act has changed. And again, we can't vary use or density with the variance permit. The proposal in front of Council today is to vary 2 setbacks for the development of a building, to be a storage building with a residential unit. The applicant is looking to reduce the side yard setback from 3 meters to 0.5 of a meter, and the rear yard from 3 meters to 1 meter. We have an internal criteria that we use for all development variance permits. This is in your report in front of you. I believe that the application meets all the criteria. Sort of basically talking about an industrial building in an already existing industrial area with very similar types of building all around it. Nothing to worry about in the sense of views. So just a visual representation of what we're talking about. This is Industrial Way, obviously Pacific Rim Highway, and here we have an unimproved district roadway that is naturally named Warren Way, and so this is the rear setback of the property. So this is the one that would go down from 3 meters to 1 meter. It would almost line up with this building here, and the side setback would be here, so reducing that to 0.5, which you can sort of see is in line with where this existing building is. Anything to do with building in District Tofino or variance permit requires a survey, so obviously there'll be a survey prior to building to ensure that the applicants were within their permitted setbacks. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Question? Councilor Anderson.
I'm just wondering if once say this passes, that we vary the setbacks, does it vary it for the whole property or just for this building that's going?
It varies it specifically for their rear lot line here.
Okay, but the whole rear lot line?
we're very
one end to the other, and also the side lot line one end to the other. Because it appears that the other building might have wanted to have the variance at some point in the past too.
There was a time in Tofino this year where we didn't require surveys, and so sometimes things were built not exactly where they were supposed to be.
Okay, so that would, it would cover the older buildings as well.
You can't.
Or,
There is no. You cannot.
or any future buildings then,
Any future building is probably where.
not just this one.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Jessica?
Yeah, thanks. I just wondered, it's 2,000 square feet, and they're talking about one residential unit.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything around the zoning of the residential unit? I mean, you allow the variation, but what happens with that residential piece? Does that require anything
No,
else,
the zoning on that property allows for one residential unit, and so if they were to develop a residential unit, I'm assuming it'd be within the building and it'd be an apartment style building. But there's no other requirements for residential versus industrial in the industrial zones.
Councilor Blanchett?
Do I gather the residential part would be included in the new building?
I believe so.
Okay. And that would be a long-term rental or a permanent residence as opposed to like single short-term rental would be.
Yeah, it's short-term rental is not permitted in any of our M zones or industrial zones,
Right.
and in the industrial zones, caretaker uses are what it actually says. It's a caretaker for a caretaker, so that would be one would think for a long-term resident, not for short-term rental.
In the one building in front of it that's already established, is there not, yes, is there not a dwelling in there as well?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure of one.
Oh.
I've never been inside the building, so if you're aware of one, then that'd be great to know. And
Okay.
what would happen, so this is what the applicant has come and said, like, he wants to build a building, and he said that he would like to put a residence as well. It's mostly storage, and it looks like there's a residence up top from the plans I've seen. One of the checks that we'd go through in the zoning bylaws, so at building permit time, was to see if there was any other residence on site, and again, you're allowed to have one residence per zone. So if it turned out that there was a residence here and we knew about it, then when he came for building permit for the residence, we'd say no, or take out this unit, and then we'll make sure there's only one, which happens sometimes in even some of our residential zones. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Move that we remove the recommendation.
Move that it be read a third time.
That's not how it works.
I moved that the district Tofino housing unit bylaw number.
We already did that. We're on 11.3, Councilor Whitminster. The development variance permit, okay.
Oh,
But if you want to read it out, go right ahead. Okay, I think
The
Councilor,
development variance permit issued for 700 Industrial Way, varying the required near yard setback from 3 metres to 1 metre, and varying the required west side yard setback from 3 metres to 0.5 metres.
thank you. Okay, so moved and seconded, thank you. So it is typical, I mean, it is normal, and I do prefer it when we read out the full motion, because it just gives everyone, including the public, a sense of exactly what we're doing, and that we're very clear. But I'm always happy to reread it too, if somebody just moves and seconds, and that's fine. So it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? Yes.
do the neighboring properties have they had any, oh yeah, it said in the report, there's nothing from that, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Just getting back to Councillor Anderson's point, if that building to the right was ever taken down, then it would have to honour the new setback, or can it still adopt the original footprint?
It goes to the new one.
Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried.